Okay, hello. Today we'll talk about three architects. We'll begin with Kunio Maekawa, a very interesting and important Japanese architect. The Japanese and the Dutch seem to rule the world of, modern or contemporary architecture. He died on this day. Today is June 26th. As you see, Kunio Maekawa, he was born in 1905 and died in 1986, was a Japanese architect and a key figure in Japanese post-war modernism. His distinctive architectural language deftly blended together elements of traditional Japanese design and modernist tenets from Europe, drawing from early career work experiences in the office of Le Corbusier and Antoine Raymond. So he worked for both architects. He's especially known for the Tokyo Bunka Kaikan and the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. Well, the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo was actually built and designed by Le Corbusier, but he was assisting, and he also worked on an extension of this museum just by himself later on. His home, which he designed and completed in 1942, has been preserved and permanently installed in the Edo Tokyo Open Air Architectural Museum. So a very accomplished architect and acknowledged for his merits for the architecture in Japan, but also outside of Japan. This was him, Kunio Maekawa. Here he is with Le Corbusier. Of course, he's on the left side of the picture. Then here he is again. We recognize Le Corbusier, and then we see Kunio Maekawa here, and with some Japanese young architects. And then here again with Le Corbusier, and again in a group with Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier is the tallest of them all, but these rather short Japanese men move the world of architecture. They continue to move it. And how do you explain it? They are humans just like all of us. But even in the present, Japanese architects move in good measure some aspects of contemporary architecture. I think we can learn a lot from the Japanese. They are very hardworking, very curious, and very inspired and very scrupulous in anything they do, extremely meticulously. Kunio Maekawa. I also saw his name written M-A-Y-E-K and so on. Here I see it's just with M-A-E. I'm still not sure which is the correct spelling. But anyway, this is Kunio Maekawa, and he died on the 26th of June, and we are today on the 26th of June. Now we begin with this industrial laboratory from 1932 in Aomori. He was, I don't know, 28 years old then. Not, maybe a spectacular work, and sorry for the pictures. They are not, don't have the correct resolution. We see some, pictures, larger pictures, building which is even appears to be kind of abandoned from what we see here. Now, in 1936, the Hinamoto Hall, no pictures. 1938, so this was 1936. 1938, the Dairen Town Hall, no pictures. Sorry, he is not one of the best known architects or the best appreciated architects on the web, although in Japan he is very well known and respected. We go now to, in my opinion, a masterful work, his own house in 1942. So who says that the shoemaker doesn't make shoes for himself? It's not always true. He was able to make a brilliant house for himself in 1942. And it's a house which is not aggressive, it's not, it has a reticence, it's perfectly symmetrical, but I think it's sublimely almost conceived, because it is a work which could be easily located within tradition or traditionalism. But there is, on the other hand, something that makes it escape that categorization, and so it's somehow halfway between tradition and innovation, between continuity and how to say, break. The interior of the living room is as it is. It is clearly a Japanese house. It's clearly a house that pays homage to the past, but also at the same time, it has the simplicity and the vigor of a modern work. And in this sense, I think is a brilliant house that he was able to build for himself. It's perfectly symmetrical, and I hope we have an image. Look at this facade. It's very well done. I mean, even for those who only like the new and the new and the new, I think would appreciate the achievement that this house is. Kunio Maekawa's own house. It's almost a paradigmatic house for Japan. He built some buildings in a brutalist mode. So he was able to also work, and he did work with concrete, but here is about wood. And I don't know if you know Tadao Ando, the master of concrete, he actually lives in a wooden house. Tadao Ando doesn't live in a concrete house or a house made in concrete. He lives in a wooden house, the house he received from his parents. This is interesting, but equally interesting is this house by Kunio Maekawa, because if you look at this drawing, you'd say this is okay, it's a fine house, but it's not the house of an innovator. Well, not only that he was an innovator, but he worked with Le Corbusier, also Antonin Raymond, a very interesting architect, born actually in former Czechoslovakia, and then he lived and worked in Japan, and then lived and worked in the United States. So Kunio Maekawa worked both for Le Corbusier and Antonin Raymond. And then other pictures from the inside of the house. This picture was taken when apparently nobody lived there. You see the access to the stair is at least symbolically blocked. I think he lived alone, and he had a space. I hope we have the plan here. A room or so for a maid, for someone who helped him with the management of the house. It's not a family house. It's a bachelor's house. But this picture, for example, even as a photograph, I think is very beautiful. Yeah, here is the plan. You see a study room, then there is the maid's room, and then the bedroom and the kitchen. That's it, and the living room. Now, I don't know if this door here truly opens like this, because usually you'd open this door the other way. This is not recommended, to open the door to see just, maybe he did it intentionally like this, but it's rather unusual. Anyway, I am doing nothing else but what I usually criticize, correctura. Correctura of the famous house built by Kunio Maekawa for himself. Yeah, in this drawing also, the door opens in the same way. And then there is a small door here, very interesting, Very interesting. I have to study more this. I don't quite understand why this is so. Anyway, Kunio Maekawa's house. Obviously, he had a very good relationship with Le Corbusier, since there are so many pictures with both of them, and also he assisted Le Corbusier in the construction of the Museum of Contemporary Art or Modern Western Art in Tokyo. The only work built by Le Corbusier in Japan, and the only work built by Le Corbusier on that side of Asia. He built a little bit in India, well, not a little bit, in Ahmedabad. He built a few important buildings, and also Chandigarh, of course. But in Japan, this is the only building. I mean, not this house. The museum we are going to see. 1952, Nippon Sogo Bank. Well, a bank is a bank. Don't expect too much spirituality here. Although there are some good banks in terms of architecture sometimes. Kunio Maekawa. Kunio Maekawa. This is probably a picture from the 1950s if you judge the aesthetics of the tram cars or the buses, whatever they are. Now the Kanakawa Prefectural Library and Music Hall in Yokohama, 1954. Already, you know, an obvious modernism here. Maybe not very spectacular, but maybe for that time. When was it built? 1954. Japan was just emerging from the ashes of the Second World War and trying to assert itself by embracing modernity and embracing technology. And soon they would dominate the world with incredible know-how. It's hard not to respect, not to admire the Japanese, really, because you know they achieved excellence in so many ways. The International House of Japan, Tokyo. He worked with another important architect, maybe both are. I only know of Junso Sakakura. I guess Yoshimura was an equally important and good architect. 1955. The International House of Japan. Sorry about the resolution of these pictures. Here you can see it better. Again, maybe this architecture is not very impressive today. But at that time, you know, 70 years ago, it represented a new beginning, kind of an architectural spring for Japan, which was, as you know, devastated by the Second World War. If we are to consider just the bombing of Tokyo and the atomic bomb dropping on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, of course, they were not angels. They participated on the wrong side, so to speak, of the war significantly. Tokyo City to demolish Kunio Maekawa's designed clubhouse. I read this, you know, this is a building that Tokyo decided, or the administration of Tokyo, to demolish. And it said, yes, the Japanese, despite the, you know, sophistication and seriousness and sensitivity, maybe, you know, they make mistakes as well, like everybody else. Why would you demolish a building by a good architect? Well, there are all kinds of commercial interests. Now, maybe to make a parking lot, like the North Americans destroyed, you know, any very important work by Frank Lloyd Wright, the Larkin building in Buffalo, in order to build a parking lot. It's incredible, no? Okayama Prefectural Office, 1955, an office building, but well, in a way, an office building, a governmental building, but you see there is a certain fragmentation here, which is close to, you know, ornamentation almost. And this is a different kind of modernity. Yes, there is the horizontality of the windows, but the horizontal windows is actually are actually composed of vertical windows. This is also something rather unique. Fukushima Education Center, 1956. You see, he can be also adventurous. And he was adventurous in this building, concrete, and we'll see other works in concrete. The Harumi Flats, Tokyo, 1959. Quite an interesting apartment building or block of flats. In my opinion, in no way inferior, at least architecturally or aesthetically, if not in its social program, to l'unité d'habitation of Le Corbusier. And this one has a very, you know, courageous, almost heroic structure, and we are going to see the plan. An impressive, almost majestic apartment building, you know, built in the 1950s. As you can see, even the Japanese took their rugs, you know, on the parapet of the balconies. It's not, this is not done only in Romania or Italy, it's done in Japan too. And but look at the structure in this cross section through the building. It's very clear, and it's very strong, and it's very, even very aesthetical in its simplicity and vigor. And there is a variety of spaces, so you know, there aren't just typical floors, all the same height, and so on. No, there are various kinds of spaces and with different configurations within the apartments. I see here some echoes of, you know, some maybe even, well, I don't know exactly when metabolism was born in Japan. This building seems to be very Japanese on one hand, and on the other hand, very, you know, very Western at the same time, with access from an exterior corridor, and this creates the genuine, you know, possibility to have the factual reality of having cross ventilation. And cross ventilation is something very useful. And I think those of you who are in Bucharest these days, when it's probably very hot, I know 2 days ago it was 36 degrees. With cross ventilation, you can have fresh air in an apartment without the need for air conditioning and so on. And here we see exactly such an apartment with cross ventilation. I also like the windows of this building because they are atypical for a block of flats. They remind one of Japan somehow. You know, they remind one even of his own house, the one that we saw earlier. But just one unit, an apartment, reminds one of a, let's say, a traditional house or his own house that we looked at. But the resoluteness, the vigor, the force of the structure, the concrete structure, is for all to see. A very interesting work, really. I admire this building. Sakagaya Community Center, 1959. Now, look, welcome to Brutalismus. From what I read, around that time, Japan was the country in the world who used the most concrete, because perhaps they wanted to evoke or yes, perhaps to evoke, you know, the power of the country to leave behind the ashes of the Second World War. So the solidity of concrete was, you know, an attribute that they, you know, search for. And there are many buildings built in raw concrete, exposed concrete, like this one. Even the inside is concrete. I know that some people think that you cannot have concrete on the ceiling. Well, what is here? It's concrete. But Kunio Maekawa was a liberated architect, so to speak, because working for Le Corbusier obviously made him open-minded and not dogmatically restrained. Look at this detail of the handrail, you know, solid wood. Maybe, I mean, not very sophisticated, but very effective. You know, this is architecture. I think good architecture doesn't need a lot of finishes. It doesn't need plaster. It doesn't need makeup. It's like a beautiful person, you know. Even if that person doesn't pass the test of a conventional, you know, beauty, it's the inner beauty that expresses itself without the need of a lot of makeup. You know, I mean, there are so many beauties that hide themselves behind a lot of makeup. Here, there isn't any makeup. It's concrete, it's wood. You get what you see. And you look at the concrete, you see clearly how it was made, this conglomerate, you see the traces of wood. It's gray, it's solid, it's raw, it's rough, it's okay. I think it's better than, you know, creating a sweet building out of concrete. Concrete is not a sweet material, whatever Tadao Ando might say. You know, he tried to polish it, but actually, I'm not sure that polishing concrete is what one should do with concrete. Kyoto Kaikan, this is, I think, a theater or some kind of opera, or it's a large building in Kyoto, a famous city, of course, 1960. Concrete here a lot, also, you know, regularity and rhythm, and you know, it's an early modernism. Well, not so early, 1960. But compared to our time, it's 63 years ago. A public building, a large building, Kunio Maekawa in Kyoto. Now, one in Tokyo from 1961, also Kaikan, the same function, some kind of a combination between theater, opera, exhibition spaces, you know, these sort of functions. A large building in Tokyo, Kunio Maekawa, 1961. Concrete here as well, and glass, of course. But you can tell already from 1950s to 1961, Japan already made some progresses. The country seems to be more confident economically and able to express this through its buildings. Kunio Maekawa. But at that time already, look how many bicycles were there in 1961. Maybe we should have a lot of bicycles too. Enough with polluting the air with our cars, parking lots, garages, and so on. And I love this tree, you know, this rural tree, if I can call it so. What a contrast, no, between this tree, which you would expect to grow from a field, you know, or in a forest, but you have it here in the middle of Tokyo, in front of a building in concrete, a large public building by Kunio Maekawa. Not bad. Even the tree, which is not green, is a very welcome presence, of course. And the interior, with a rather agitated wall there, highly decorative. Tokyo, Kunio Maekawa, 1961. Now the Hayashibara Museum of Art in Okayama, 1964, a very traditional museum, and it shows his ability to not turn his back on the past. Even here, there are some so-called innovations, but the front elevation is of a building that seems to be just restored without alarmingly innovative interventions. And the same, of course, the same care for nature, the same care for what we call the landscape, the same care for every leaf of a bush or of a tree, and every care or a lot of care for any piece of sand or any rock. This is Japan, and I think we can learn a lot from them in this field. Maybe not only on this in this field. Hayashibara Museum of Art, Kunio Maekawa. Now the Saitama Cultural Center, 1966, sense of proportion, discretion, and durability. Visiting Kunio Maekawa's Saitama Prefectural Museum. The words do not belong to me. I found them somewhere on the web. This is the website where I found it about this particular work. And this is the cover of an issue of the Japan Architect, the notorious Japanese magazine. And by the way, we have plenty of them here in Dokanyasa. I'm very, very proud of the fact that we have great Japanese architecture magazines here. GA, A+U, Architecture and Urbanist, the Japan Architect. Anyway, I love the way he works with brick on the walls, brick on the pavement of the space around the buildings. Apparently, this usage of brick came rather late in his professional life and was not so common during his time and not so common in Japan, period. But he used a lot the brick, especially in the later period of his life or professional life. This is the model in wood. Brick never lets you down, really. It is an eternal friend of the architect, if we only know how to use it. Frank Lloyd Wright said, give me a brick and I will transform it into its equivalent in gold. And you know very well the dialogue between Louis Kahn and brick. You know, like he said, I asked the brick what it wants to be, and the brick said, I want to be an arch. Now, who talks with a brick? Only someone who loves brick, of course. Maekawa was our first and last free, meaning ideologically independent architect, who till the end rejected returning to only Japanese essentialism. Toyo Ito said this. As you know, Toyo Ito, a very important Japanese architect, who also received the Pritzker Prize and who also nurtured other important architects like Fujimoto and others. Maekawa was our first and last free, ideologically independent architect who until the end rejected returning to only Japanese essentialism. An interesting statement. Not that the Japanese essentialism was totally banished, but he returned to other things as well, and not only to Japanese essentialism. The steel pavilion in Expo 70 Osaka, which was one of the most forward-looking world exhibitions ever, the Osaka Expo 1970, he designed a rather reticent, almost anonymous, architecturally speaking, pavilion. This is the building. You would say, well, nothing special about it. maybe that's exactly what is special about it, that is not in any way asking for attention. The only reference to the fact that it is a steel pavilion is the steel part here. Otherwise, the building is, another building. And this is very interesting that this very creative architect chose in an ambiance of, some very flamboyant, even creative buildings to be very low key. Interesting, because yes, let's say you have a society of Baroque buildings, and in between them, somewhere there, amongst them, you build something that is very, very reticent, maybe minimalist, although minimalism could be excessive too. That's why sometimes minimalist could be actually called maximalism, because you could be excessive in the opposite direction from excess, and it's still a form of excess. But here there is no excess. But you see the power of the steel part, that steel beam that distinguishes itself so almost dramatically, although the architectural language is simple. I guess he also designed this thing which is in front of the building. It's not something very impressive. The interior, okay, you see the scale is it's huge, but this is a machinery, an equipment of some sort within the building. The building is not impressive. Tokyo Marine and Fire Insurance building in 1974. This is a tall building and it's done brilliantly. It's I hope I have better pictures. I say it's done brilliantly. It's not a fluid building. It's not a parametric achievement, but I think it has sensitivity besides seriousness, structural and otherwise. So, and again, brick. It's not very common to have a building at this height and of this volume, of this caliber, all covered in brick. He obviously had some love for brick at that time. The structure, of course, was not brick. This is not a brick masonry. It's just covered with brick. But I think it's an excellent tall building, office building. Kunio Maekawa in Tokyo, 1970 something, in the 70s. He built it, and we see the Japanese flag. Maybe that red, I don't know, I didn't study the Japanese flag, but maybe that red circle represents none other than Amaterasu, the sun goddess, a primordial goddess in the Shinto tradition. Interestingly, in Japan, the sun is a woman. Well, in other mythologies, is a man, and the moon is a woman. But in Japan, the sun is the woman. Amaterasu. Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum, 1975. Modernity, but modernity with touches of hesitancies, if I can say so, because of the presence of the brick. Again, it's not a museum. That's why perhaps Toyo Ito said what he said. He didn't allow himself to be governed by that Japanese essentialism, as Toyo Ito called it. So it's an architecture which is Japanese, but not in an obsessive way, and this building could have been in some other places. It negotiates between the aesthetics of Japan and aesthetics from other parts of the world, maybe Europe, without renouncing to be Japanese, but not in oppressively obsessive way. Kumamoto Prefecture Museum of Art in Kumamoto, 1976. We see here that a modern architect like Kunio Maekawa didn't turn his back on ornament. You see the walls do have a pattern, an ornamental design, and we should be aware of it, because I think we have a tendency to totally neglect ornament, and that's simply not right, because structure was always accompanied by ornament. Even in the work of Adolf Loos, who wrote Ornament and Crime, and even in the work of Mies van der Rohe, in no other building than the Barcelona Pavilion. This is worth reflecting on, that Mies van der Rohe and Adolf Loos used ornament through the marble that they employed, sometimes highly decorative, highly ornamental. Kunio Maekawa, this is the plan of this museum. There is movement, but there is also some restraint. And the dialectics between the green of the trees and the redness of the bricks adds, you know, some tension, chromatic tension, which I think does good. I even noticed that if you make, let's say you make a salad and you have green salad, you have salad, and you put a tomato or 2 tomatoes on that plate, they enhance each other, the salad, the green with the red, because they are opposite colors. And the appetite, I think, could increase a little bit because of that. The dialectics between red and green, like in this case, you know, grass and trees and bushes and the bricks of the building. The Museum of East Asian Art in Cologne, in Köln, 1977, that is, we are in Europe. Again, an unassuming building, done correctly, done, you know, with a certain sobriety and reticence. It has some concrete as well, and of course the water and the sky and the trees. It's a fine building. It's okay, maybe it's not a wow building, and it is not, and he didn't intend to make it a wow building, although he probably was capable when necessary. The landscape is, you know, shows the skill of the Orient clearly, and I think we can learn in this field from them a lot. But this is for Asian art, the Museum for Asian Art in Köln, in Cologne, in Germany. Fukuoka Art Museum, 1979. As you can see, in almost all his works, later works, he employed bricks, both vertically and horizontally. And bricks do not pollute, as opposed to concrete, which does. But I don't think that's why he used bricks, because at that time, the concern for pollution wasn't as great as should be today. The National Museum of Western Art Annex, because the National Museum of Western Art was actually built by Le Corbusier, and he assisted Le Corbusier, but as an assistant. But he built this annex in 1979. This is the museum built by Le Corbusier, the only work in Japan by Le Corbusier. And here we see fragments of the building built by Kunio Maekawa. An extension, an annex to the building built by Le Corbusier. So it's on the right is what Kunio Maekawa built. Another museum of art in Sendai, 1981. So many museums built just by Kunio Maekawa, and of course, almost any architect of a certain stature in Japan or worldwide built at least one museum. So many museums for the, to the exasperation of the Dadaists, because the Dada founders and the Dadaists in general didn't like museums at all. And in a way, I understand why. Because yes, you have to protect the artworks, but on the other hand, you kind of estrange the artwork from the medium or the place it came into being in. And but it's hard to know what to do. You do have to protect the artwork, but you almost protect it by killing it to an extent. Maybe that's why Constantin Brâncuș didn't want his sculptures in Paris to be removed from his atelier. And he actually thought he made an agreement with the government, with the administration of Paris or of France, to leave his artworks, his sculptures in his atelier, that old atelier he lived in and worked in for many years. But France didn't listen, and they built in my opinion, not a very inspired museum for him by Renzo Piano. On the other hand, I understand the old building that Brâncuș used couldn't accommodate too many tourists, that's for sure. So maybe there was a need to create a new museum. Unfortunately, the choice of the architect, in my opinion, was not quite inspired. Renzo Piano was and is a good architect, but I think he misjudged a little bit Brâncuș, as he misjudged a little bit Paul Klee, because he built a museum for Paul Klee as well, and that one questionable too, in my opinion. Anyway, this is the museum by Kunio Maekawa. It's another museum. At least here the walls are not white, which is a good change. Kumamoto Prefectural Theater, 1982. Ornament on the pavement. I don't have great pictures here, but you can see it. A theater, of course. But again, we can only salute and contemplate the care for each plant, for each tree. You can tell that there is a lot of care for nature, and I think we need to do the same thing all over the world. We need badly nature, badly. Yes, we have to take care, I guess, of the human functions, but we also have to take care of every blade of grass, actually, religiously almost. Okay, that was it. And now we'll talk about, but now let's have a short discussion, if you don't mind.